Hey there, nation. Another great episode for you today. Joe is chatting with author Joni Swift about her journey as an author and the help she got along the way. So stick around. You don't want to miss it.
Hey, Author Nation. It's Joe Solari, and this is another episode from the Raleigh-Durham area. We're still in our studio here. This is a little bit different and one that I was waiting to see when it would actually happen. And it's our first kind of single author focused on an author that's part of Author Nation session. So we're going to be talking with Joni Swift. How are you?
I'm doing great. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for trucking out here to see this. It was, and for participating in the community. And
it's a great community. It's so much fun. Yeah. And I'm thrilled to be here.
Cool. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different stuff, kind of a little bit about your journey in being an author. And before we got on, you mentioned you've been to a few different cons and kind of talking about those to help people understand how they've helped you in different ways. And we'll just, hang out and have a cup of coffee and
sounds good.
Talk shop. So why don't we start with what you write and how it all got started?
So I write historical mysteries, and it all got started with an extreme act of hubris. I was reading historical mysteries, and the books I was reading just weren't scratching the itch. There were things that I felt could have been done better or been more emotional that would have touched me in ways that I was kind of seeking at that time. And I kind of very foolishly was like, well, I should just write a book.
What year was this?
Ooh, that was probably 9 years ago.
Okay.
So yes, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I got started that way and started learning and getting interested in it. And writing a book was a little tougher than I thought it was going to be. But I think, I have a lot of interests. I'm very dynamic. I do a lot of different things. And what impressed me early on was that when it got tough, I kept doing it. And that was really kind of the moment that I was like, I'm cut out for this. I need to do this because I'm enjoying it even when it's hard.
And when you say hard, like what was the stuff that was kind of feeling challenging to you?
Well, it was, I'm actually a scientist by trade.
Okay.
I have a science degree. And so, learning the craft and understanding how to get what was in my head onto the page in an effective way to reach somebody else. That was tough at first. So,
and that was a while ago. There wasn't nearly the kind of resources there are now. Like,
true.
What were some of the things you were like getting help from?
I did a master class at Thriller Fest with Donald Moss, who was an amazing professor. I also was very lucky that I had another author a romance author actually, who kind of took me under her wing. And she now writes hard-boiled crime fiction. She kind of got out of romance and went a different direction.
Wow.
But yeah, J.D. Allen was hugely helpful to me and just sort of letting me know I was on the right track and to keep going.
Cool. And so you say historical mystery, that still is pretty broad, kind of like let's go in. So what kind of time period are we talking about? And is it a series or you do standalones?
So far I've released the Edward Terrington Mysteries. It's a series of 4 books. They're set in the early 1860s in the prequel's in Spain, the first book's in Egypt and Greece, the second book is in France and Prussia, and the third and fourth books are in England.
So lots of interesting stuff happening in those places during that time.
Great backdrops, yeah.
And like you're already a fan. Like what is it that draws you to like historical fiction or historical mysteries?
I love learning while I'm reading for entertainment.
And
I feel that. It's really funny because I hated history in high school. Absolutely hated it because it was all about, dates and wars and, memorization. Whereas what I love to focus on is who were these people and what was their motivation and what was their relationship to other people and sort of the underpinning and the things beneath the events that you were taught in high school.
Yeah. I think that when history's done well, it's almost more like you're feeling like you're watching old reels of current events, right? You're
Exactly.
understanding more of the motives and the
Exactly.
cool. So you went to Thriller Fest really early in your journey.
Yes.
That was kind of a big deal.
It was a very big deal. I did Pitch Fest, tried to pitch my book to publishing companies, took the master class, and it was a great learning experience from the standpoint of just how broad this whole, even just historical mystery is a broad topic. And how many different ways you can, sort of skin the cat. Mm-hmm. So it was great.
So you get the first book done. How long did it take you to get the first book out?
So I went ahead and pre-wrote the first 2.5 books before I released anything, because I wanted to make sure I had continuity and consistency with the characters. And so it took me a long time to, like I said, I've been doing this for 9 years. I released my first book in February of 23, and I released my fourth book in February of 24.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. It did take a while.
So and the fourth book was not intended. I was originally thinking it was to be a trilogy. Mm-hmm. And when I got mostly done with the third book, I was like, Edward needs a fourth book.
No, I think this is really interesting because so often, with a lot of the indie publishing right now, everyone is, really fast publishing, right? And so many people that I've talked to, you'll be hearing about their success, and then you're like, well, I know I started writing during COVID.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting to have someone here that's, more deliberate and taken time and develop that and to stick with it and then go through the process. So, help us understand like what that was like, especially if were you going to things like 20 books while you were still writing and not published?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. My first 20 books I had not published.
Yeah. So which years were those?
Actually 21 and 22.
Okay. So here you are hanging out where there's people that are like publishing in between sessions.
Yeah.
And you've got a book that's probably older than their career.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's got their own path.
Yeah.
And what's wonderful about 20 Books Author Nation, is that everybody recognizes that and everybody celebrates that. Yeah. It's not my way or the highway. It's here's 10 ways you can do this, and you're doing it different from me. What can I learn from you that might help me on my path? It's really unique in that respect.
Yeah. I think with the show change, the other thing that we're really trying to do is like previous to being here, the whole team was in Cleveland. We went to the CEX show, and you'll start on the podcast. You'll start seeing some of these episodes released, but we're purposely going places that are outside of like fiction to find people that we can bring in and get their ideas around things like marketing and advertising. And it was kind of funny because we were involved in their publishing track, and we're really impressed with a lot of these people that have these massive YouTube channels and, crazy stuff that they're doing with blogs and really inspiring us. And then we hear them talking about publishing, and it's like, God, you guys have no idea what you're doing. Hold my beer. This is how you do it. Just sit down, take notes. Like that collaboration amongst people and being open to hear and help, right? That I think is super important to have the resources you're going to need. Sorry. So now we're publishing, and how did you kind of prep, like seeing you had some time, you probably had a lot of ideas about marketing going into this.
I did. I actually, I have many people who are in graphic design and marketing in my family, and I've purposefully not involved them in my career. But I did discover as I was going through this whole publishing journey that I really do enjoy advertising, and I do like writing copy and trying to like distill this down to a hook. It's going to get somebody interested in it. I find that, I mean, it's tough. It's not easy, but I find it fascinating. And what image is working and that kind of thing. And I need to spend more time with it because I've spent a lot of time focused on the writing and less time with the advertising. But I'm kind of leaning in that direction right now as kind of a palate cleanse.
Well, when you say that, the thing it makes me think about is the more that you can marry the two, right? Because that first sentence of that ad may be the only thing somebody ever reads that you write.
Yes.
So how can we get that to the conclusion of whatever you're writing there to be a click to reading more of your stuff, right? It's that whole...
it's the psychology behind it.
Yeah. And so... now it becomes an even more intense, right? When you think about it that way.
Yeah, no pressure.
No. But on the other side is like, the more you make it like your fiction, that to me seems like a really good filter, right? Because any advertisement, it's about attracting the right people and repelling the ones that aren't interested.
And it also helps you hone your writing in that you're very succinctly trying to engage somebody. And that informs your fiction writing. I mean, I try and make every chapter end like that.
No, especially in today's world, when there is so many options.
Yeah.
That people, any shows that Susan and I watch, it's like, you've got about 15, 20 minutes. And then are like, are you bored?
Yeah. Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about how did you decide to go to market? Are you in KU? Are you wide? What fits with your business strategy?
So I'm in KU because I wanted to do a rapid release strategy since I had written all these books, mostly pre-written. And I wanted to focus on the writing more so than, how to advertise wide, how to set up wide, that kind of thing. So that is probably in my future, but I've been focusing on other things. So
yeah. I think that it's not an either or thing, right? In the sense of it's what's best for what you're trying to do. And in the beginning, it's sometimes easier to just start where there's this really rich audience. Then down the road, it's not that you're trying to pull them out of there. You're going to go look for new people. But it's nice to have that base. So,
right. And once you publish one and you're in KU, you don't want to go wide because you'll just upset the people who want to keep reading your books.
Yeah,
they want you to stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about it on the podcast a couple of times. It's like putting things in and out of KU is not. That's you trying to do something about your fear and concern about the marketplace, but how does that look from the customer's perspective? And if you don't have if you're somebody that writes a pace like you do and you're doing things in a slower way, then you have to think about, okay, well, where am I going to release it first? And is it going to move in and out of these things? People can do that, but you have to really communicate to the community that you're serving. This is how it's going to work, because they'll get upset for sure.
And you bring up a good point, just keeping in mind the community you're serving.
Yeah, if you want somebody else's money, you probably should listen to them. It's like,
not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we complicate it. We're getting all this stuff. It's like, well, every time you ask somebody what problem they'd like solved, and they tell you, and you say, I could solve that problem. This is what it costs. Or in this case, what kind of entertainment do you want? Well, I want historical mysteries set in this time, and depending on how gritty they are, or there's all kinds of different flavors. Like, talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you decide to, in the context as that you started with, which was, I was reading and my itches weren't getting scratched. Like, what is the itch?
Well, there's a few. So I guess one of the things is really the historical backdrop is, like I started with the Suez Canal. My book one is set during the construction of the Suez Canal, which was one of the greatest humanitarian disasters ever. Mm. And most people don't know that.
Yeah,
most people have no idea, really don't know much at all about the Suez Canal. And so I really wanted to kind of tell that story as, and it's not the main part of the story, but it is the scene that in which my story is set. Mm-hmm. So it's a large part of the backdrop. And there's so much there to talk about between the relationship between Britain and France and Egypt, and between the Egyptian Pasha and his people, and how the mechanics of how they were building the canal, and between hand digging and steam shovels. Oh, wow. And sort of that whole, there's such a panoply of mm-hmm. material in there to mine from and work with. And that's the kind of thing I love reading about, is I'm learning and I'm like, I didn't know that. That's fascinating, know?
So. Yeah, it makes, I've loved books like that where it's, you're really getting immersed in that whole education process and feeling what was happening back then. And it matters to the story, right? Especially when it's like, okay, not only did I just learn about that, whatever this guy's dealing with because of these guys hand digging, it's going to play into the story later on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so that was really kind of the big thing of just how could I find these tidbits? Mm-hmm. My second book, Alfred Nobel of the Nobel Peace Prize, is one of he's kind of a side character, but cool. he's involved in the story, and it's aspects of his life that most people don't know. So there's so much fun stuff to play with.
So that's one of the itches.
That's one of the itches. The I guess the other one too. I love to have a romantic element to my stories, and there's a romantic arc across the 4 stories between Edward Terrington, who is the main character, and Catherine Briggs, who is a young lady who is a total upstart, mm-hmm. and she is not the norm for an 1860s woman at all. She's a handful, and which makes it a lot of fun to write. But handling the romantic arc, mm-hmm. and I've seen books where there's a lot of tension up until the very end, and then it all falls apart. Mm. And that's one of the. There's 2 books in my entire reading history that really got me angry, and that was one of them.
book thrown.
Yeah, it was just like that was not handled well. Mm. So handling the romantic arc as part of that, and slowly building tension, mm-hmm. and either bringing people together or setting them apart. So
cool. So you launched the first book. How did you get kind of set up for that launch, and then how do you feel it went?
I feel that the first launch went really well. I am, as a researcher who, I research history. I also researched everything about self-publishing. Mm. So, I did courses with various people about, and, different, I'm on tons of email lists about how to do book launches and promo stacking and all of that, and trying to get everything lined up properly. I probably stacked my promos a little too close to each other because it was kind of just one mass of influx of orders, which was fantastic. I'm not complaining, but it was a little hard to tell
What did what?
yeah, what did what. So I didn't, I kind of did it over the course of 10 days, and I probably should have spread it out a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of hard when you're doing that because like sometimes it's like you just have to deal with their calendar and what slots are open and
And there's a lag too, because not everybody opens their email and immediately orders your book.
Right. Yeah. The whole patience for your customers to like read reader magnets and actually finish the book they're reading right now before they pick yours up is something that nobody figures into their marketing.
No.
So you because that was really, you were starting at zero. Did you do any like list building ahead of time?
I did. I released my first book in February of 23, and I started my email list in November of 22, and there were 6 people on my email list, and 4 of them were my own emails.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
I now have over 3,000 people on my email list.
Wow.
And that happened that probably happened by the fall of 23.
So, like, let's double click on this. Let's hear what the Joni research came up to build a list that size that quick.
So part of it is I kind of aligned myself with cozy mysteries, and cozy mystery readers are voracious. Mm-hmm. And so doing cozy mystery list building campaigns, that was really kind of the thing that got me there.
Yeah.
But within like 2 months, I had 1,000. It was crazy fast.
So you had some type of like prequel that you had written?
Yes. That's available for free on my website, joniswift.com.
Oh, shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. So that, and so how you had that, and how, tell me a little bit, like when you designed that, some things that you may have thought about as far as, yes, it's a prequel and it needs to just demonstrate your writing, but like it is a marketing tool. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around that since you did all this research.
So, I wrote it after the first 2 books. So I really had settled into, how I write, what I enjoy about the genre, what I kind of focus on. And so I just picked an event from history, or like kind of a place in time that had some interesting people that I could pull from. Queen Isabella, we're in Spain, in Cadiz, Spain for the prequel. And Queen Isabella is a character in that, and some interesting things that about her life and that have happened to her feature in the book. But that was really, that went really quickly because I had kind of settled in and had a feel for what I was doing at that point in terms of craft.
Well, and a lot of people that wouldn't do that, right? They'd write the prequel first, but doing it the way you did it is so smart because you have the experience of the writing and what you've learned going through the books. Plus you kind of know anything that kind of you discovered in the stories that can, be hooked into that prequel. Like the fact that, Tony Lee, who's going to be speaking at the show, his write backwards idea, like it's only linear for the reader. You can always go back.
Right. and that really did help. Having those first 2 books written really did help inform the prequel because I knew the relationships of the people, and the prequel was there to help establish those relationships and really build up what I sort of started with in book 1. And so it gave me a great opportunity to kind of go back and say, oh yeah, like how did these guys become really close? How did this relationship really begin? And so that was the prequel is really covering a lot of that ground.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. But again, like this is counterintuitive or actually counter to a lot of things that you're told about like getting books out fast. And the whole more, I would say it's the internal pressure that we put on ourselves to like get this done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really felt that with book 4 because I hadn't planned on it. So I hadn't pre-written it. And so I had given myself this luxury of time for the first 3 books, especially the first 2. The third book was a little bit more pressure because I hadn't completed it when I released book 2. So and I was releasing every 3 months. So I had 3 months to polish book 3. Still, that's a generous amount of time. And book 4, I had 3 months to write it from jump.
Yeah.
And that, I'm glad I did it. I know I can do it, but it was a lot of pressure and a ton of focus trying to meet my deadline. And I did not, you talk about satisfying reader expectations. I set it up as a pre-order. I had to have it done. Yeah, it was tight, but
will you be doing that again?
I don't think so. I mean, it might happen, and I know I can do it. It was a lot. It was a lot.
Well, like let's kind of take this moment to think, like, having done this now, how have you thought about, like, moving forward? Like, what's your plan as far as, like, new series or, like, how you would like to write? I mean, I think this is an important part of what we're trying to do with the show, is get people to say it's super okay to stop and rethink through and figure out what my best life through writing is, and it will change over time.
Right, and that is another reason why I'm really glad that I did that, and that I met my objective, and I put out a good book, and I'm thrilled with that. But for my best writing life, I would like to take a little more time with that. But going forward, I have a spin-off series planned for one of my characters. Her name is Joëlle Lemarchal, and she is another fiery French woman of the same time period. And so she will be my main protagonist going forward for the next series.
Cool. And you have a kind of time frame when you're thinking, like, how many books, time to write, when they'll drop?
So I'm hoping to have... life has happened since my last release in February, and I have done very little on my writing front because I've had a lot of other things going on. But I want to have at least the prequel done early in 25. And then hopefully I can kind of co-write, the prequel in book 1. And because the nice thing is, since it's a spin-off series, I already have a good idea about the character. I already know who she is.
Yeah.
So now it's just, putting her in fun places and messing with her.
Yeah. Well, and I this is a gross generalization of the genre, but I think while there is a lot of voracious readers that are floating around there's also a lot of authors that are putting out books a lot slower in that genre, right? Because it requires a lot of work on your part.
It does.
Because if you don't get the history right, you will get emails.
Oh, I know. And I keep leaning on, it is historical fiction. It is fiction, but it does, you do have to get the history right. And, I figure if it happened within 5-ish years of when I'm writing, it's good enough.
Yeah.
So I don't need any purists coming at me saying that didn't happen for 3 years later. Well, that's fiction. Yeah. But it does take a ton of research. And so it does tend to slow you down.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you've got a career doing other stuff. How are you managing all of this, and how has it changed, since you've launched and thinking about things?
So, I would say managing my time is probably one of my bigger challenges, because I am interested in many different things. And so I have a lot of different pots that I'm stirring. And so trying to organize my time and not just rely on, now I feel like writing, as opposed to really I should be writing, and keeping the habit.
Yeah.
That's something that I do struggle with. But it being interested in a lot of different things helps keep all of it fresh.
Yeah.
But I discovered also during these last few months when I haven't been writing that I get bored easily. And without writing, I'm like, well, now what am I doing? You know, so I kind of took my break, and now I'm kind of back to, what plots can I come up with?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's one of the things that gets confusing for folks. And there's the whole burnout thing, right? But I also think there's this thing that happens when, when you are able to write faster or really produce stuff and you're kind of trying to keep the engine rolling, you're not seeing a deterioration in the quality, right? Because there could be where like your writing's getting better, your technique is keeping going, but you don't have the time to refill the well. So like the ideas just aren't as good.
Yes.
Right.
That I am a big proponent of the idea that, some months are for breathing in and some months are for breathing out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And so and that's kind of how I've approached these last 3-4 months without writing, is that this is my time of inhaling.
Yeah.
I'm calming myself. I'm looking for new ideas. I'm taking stock of the world around me, because, I don't want to say that some of my characters may have, character traits of some people I know, but it could happen.
So here's a question for you. Where do your best ideas come to you? Like doing like.
Oh, that's a tough question. I have a really odd way of writing in that I think best when I'm walking. And so I tend, I get my steps in down.
Yeah.
Because I walk in circles in my house.
Oh, you're like me. I do that. It annoys my wife so much.
Yeah, my husband just goes to a different floor. He's like, I don't need to be a part of this. But and actually, my husband is a D&D like dungeon gamer master guy, and so he's really great at coming up with plot points. And so sometimes I'll come to him and I'll be like, I've got here's the situation. And, I need to get them off the roof of a burning building or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like what can we come up with here that's a little 007-y kind of,
Yeah.
And he'll just start spouting stuff off. So he's a huge help to me from that perspective.
Oh, cool.
But, once I get into the history a little bit, that's where really I start, pulling together different threads of who's doing what, where.
Yeah. One of the reasons I asked that is like, I've yet to have somebody say to me, well, where I really get inspired is sitting in front of a blank screen. Like it's like magic happens when I watch a cursor blank. It's never right? It's like walking, shower.
Right.
It's always places like, so I think that's the whole point of that is like, think about that. That's where the magic happens. It's not sitting for 12 hours in a chair in front of, blue light melting your eyeballs. It's getting those, those conversations going with people watching. Really good.
And just sort of filling up a scene in your head to where it's like, oh, I got to write this down.
Yeah.
Because then you get in front of the computer and then you're writing the dialogue and you're writing the scene setting. And that's just, that's turning the cog even more.
Yeah. It's the mechanics of it, right? Where you're like, okay, now how can I craft that better? How can I make the dialogue show rather than tell and all that stuff? Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. So we were before we hopped on. You mentioned you went to quite a few shows. Kind of tell us about some of in your education journey, some of the different shows you go to now and plan to go to, and kind of the value. I'm sure they all have different value for you, what you get out of them.
Sure. So early on, I went to BoucherCon, and BoucherCon is absolutely a reader conference, and it's wonderful to meet readers and to engage with them on a one-to-one basis. And that was a lot of fun for that, and I have not made it back to BoucherCon since the first one, actually first two that I went to in North Carolina and Florida. So it's been a little bit, but now I'm really enjoying 20 Books Author Nation because there's just so much there. It's for me. It's for my journey. It's for what I need. So if I'm having trouble with marketing, there's a ton of people there I can talk to about that. If I'm having trouble with ideas, there's people there for that. If I'm having trouble with, anything that relates to this, covers, writing copy, everybody's there to help. And that's really the beautiful thing about it is everybody is so helpful.
Yeah.
I've been to other conferences and people are sweet, and I'm not denigrating any other conference, but in terms of like helping you on your writing journey, right? That's really a unique spot there. So.
Yeah. And that's what always attracted me to what Craig had created. And I think that we've kind of taken that and turned it up to 11 in the sense of, in the past, it was kind of one way, really heavily focused on. And now we're saying, like, there's all these really smart people that are part of Wide for the Win. And there's people that are doing things on Kickstarter. And, the team has been out. We did Social Media Marketing World. We did CEX for the sole purpose of, like, what are other people doing to market content? Like this, let's get out of this bubble that we're in and stop thinking about the same 2 or 3 strategies. And we're bringing people to this that, what's kind of cool is they have no idea about this community. Like, we explained to them, like, 1,800 authors get together in Las Vegas for a week.
Right. Right.
Like, that's a big conference for a lot of like, CEX is only 300 people. Social Media Marketing World was about the same size, right? So, like, for these folks to get exposure to us is exciting for them.
Sure.
And then we can help them understand, like, here's what's different about what we do. Like, and in some respects, it can be with what they know and what we know pulled together. It opens up so many new doors.
Yeah. And you brought up an interesting point, and one that really kind of shook me when I went to my first 20 Books conference, is that I was in a room with 1,800 authors. And, writing is such a lonely profession. You're sitting by yourself, you're plotting by yourself. Some people work, in collaboration, but most don't. And to be sitting in a room with 1,800 people who get it.
Yeah.
I mean, because it is kind of an insane career. I mean, storytelling is wonderful, but there is so much that goes into this. And it can be, when you get negative feedback, when you get that bump that says, no, really, you need to do it this way, it can be really daunting because you feel like you're facing it alone.
Yeah.
And when you're in that room with 1,800 people, it was so emotional for me because I was like, oh my God, everybody here gets this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's amazing.
And the journey to find the things like this, or, some of these other conferences that you mentioned, is hard because there's so much stuff out there that is garbage, right? It's like, oh, well, you can make $1 million at this, and oh, it's easy, and I'm going to help you sell. There's a lot of predatory stuff.
There is.
That you have to get through to get to a place where it's like, oh no, like, and it's okay that you did that. I did it too. Like,
right. Sure.
Yeah. So we'll be seeing you in November.
I'm really trying to make that happen.
Okay.
I have like 3 other things happening in November, and I'm trying to move them all around so I can go to Vegas again.
Right. Because we got some exciting stuff, but if you can't, we've got the digital tickets so you can get some of the content. You're in the community.
Oh yeah.
So you'll start seeing more and more stuff get revealed there. That's where we're rolling everything out. So yeah, this has been great having you on, sharing your story. What let's end on this question. What would you hope that if it was you back when you first made this decision, your past self, like what would your present self want to make sure that person knows?
You can do it. You can do it. I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome when I first started. I'm trained as a scientist. I did not go to college to be an author. It's not an English major. And there was a lot of internal dialogue about how, what do you think you're doing? You don't know how to do this. What, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And I had to really consciously, every single time that came up, refute it. No, I can do this. I can do this. And I kind of boiled it down to, I just had to tell myself I can do it one more time than I tell myself I can't.
Yeah.
And just distill it to that one moment. And, years later, yes, it's been years, but years later, I have a complete series out in the world being enjoyed and read by readers, and I've got more planned. So you can do it.
Yeah.
You really can.
And I know I said that was the last question, but one thing I find your story so intriguing. Like we've said, you've got life's happening. You got like a lot of things you got to plan. You said it was interrupting your author career in some respects, or at least getting the books out. Like, what are some of the things that are going through your head with managing all of this, and how are you kind of coming to some kind of reconciliation with like where everything's at? Like, I think you talking about that is probably a internal monologue that a lot of authors are having right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I discovered that at 20 Books Author Nation is that everybody was like, imposter syndrome's big. It's funny because I've taken this time off and focused on other things, and I'm now discovering I need to get back to it. Like, I need that creative outlet. And so I'm really kind of reconnecting with it from that perspective of, this is actually something I need to do for me. It's not I have to do it for the market. It's not I have to do it to keep my author career going. I have to do this for me.
Yeah. That's powerful.
It's hugely powerful. Yeah. And it's a great realization, because it means I know what I need to do for myself.
Yeah. Like you think about that, and it's two things. Like, one, it's like, that's motivation enough. It's like, oh, this, but also it's like to think about how that's really self-care.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's something you're doing for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, on that we'll end, because that's such a positive thing.
Yes.
Joni, thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Cool. So, like, final shameless plug, website again, all that good stuff.
JoniSwift.com and Joni Swift Historical Mysteries. Go get them.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.